All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to we're on episode 3, Carlin. We did it.
3. We made it.
Yeah, episode 3 of Unscrewed,
Mm-hmm.
where we're attempting to unscrew the situation that we're in societally, the West, in America, whether it's in education, our politics, and any other institution that is perhaps it's a futile endeavor to try and unscrew it. But we at least should try it. Right. Is that a pretty good summary? Carlin Borsinko, KB community, you are Dr. Carlin Borsinko. I'm just Truman, the random scrub.
Well, I guess so. I only pull out doctor, though, when I'm pissed at someone and want to leverage my title over them.
Ah, okay.
Well, but you don't have to call me doctor. You don't have to call me doctor until you piss me off, Truman.
Okay, fair enough. Well, at least you have those credentials. I just am a random scrub. I either record this in my bathroom at home or I'm literally in a closet. I'm going to post a picture of this. I'm at my in-laws in a little storage closet. There's like a mattress and some containers over here. Everything's like piled up.
Hey, it's probably more soundproof than my second bedroom that I'm sitting in.
Perhaps. But I don't have the wonderful backdrop that you have whenever it comes to all the colors and stuff. Exactly. So Carlin, it's a long time no see, by the way. I haven't seen you in like a month of Sundays.
I know. We actually got to spend some time together in person for the first time in forever at James Lindsay's workshop in Tampa, which I thought was pretty rad.
It was. Let's talk about that for a little bit. And then I have something else I want to pick your brain about. But what was your takeaway from the Tampa? I mean, tell people what that workshop was. And, just kind of what your general experience was like.
Yeah, it was so good. It was like, so James Lindsay basically did like a day and a quarter of just talking about what critical race theory is and using their primary source literature to basically back up every point he had to make about how destructive the ideology is and what it's trying to do. And it was just like, it was so good. It was so good. Like oftentimes I love and adore James Lindsay, but oftentimes I get frustrated with him because I think that he gets too long-winded and too verbose and too in the weeds on these things, because that's where his head is. That's like what he really likes to do. But what I loved about this workshop is he has gotten to the point now of being able to talk about this so succinctly, so clearly, make the absolute best case that I've seen made about how this is actually like a destructive Marxist ideology that is designed to just destabilize the entire system. And I always feel like, that's something I think that a lot of us that are doing this, like, I feel like everyone has a moment where they can see it clearly, like what this ideology is trying to do, but making the case for it in a way in which you don't sound like a crazy person is a whole different thing, right? Because I feel like a lot of times when I make the case that no, this entire thing is not about race, it's only about power, it's only about destabilizing the system, I feel like every time I make that case, I feel like I sound like a crazy person. And he made it, and he made it really clearly and really succinctly, and he did such a good job. I thought it was great. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, like you said, I hate that I have so many of these things that whenever I say them, and I even catch myself, and I wonder if this is just part of, I think we've talked about this before, but just part of like that formerly being, so indoctrinated into a lot of these leftist ideas where I have these thoughts where I'm like, am I crazy for thinking this? Where I feel like almost, and by the way, it's good to be self-checking, right? Whenever you have something, like you don't want to be so confident in every little thought that pops into your head that you aren't in a constant state of like trying to verify, what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I think that the reality is exactly what you said, is that with a lot of these things, especially when you're saying this is Marxism, this is authoritarian, total top-down control of society, that whenever, if you take an average person off the street and they're like, yeah, tomorrow my work is doing this diversity, equity, inclusion thing that we have to do, and we're trying to learn how to be, more sensitive to people of different races. If your first response is, oh, so they're going to teach you Marxism, they're going to indoctrinate you in Marxism, you're going to sound like a crazy person. Like you just are. And so you have to be able to draw that line between what they're being told, the rhetoric, the definitions of those words. One of my favorite takeaways from it was communists use our vocabulary, but not our dictionary. If you can't draw that straight line in a way that's like, hey, I know this sounds crazy, but here's their own words. Here's the way they describe this. And, this is what you are being taught, even if they're not using those exact words, even if they're not saying seize the means of production, right? Like, that's what this is. That's what it leads to. Then, yeah, if you can't make that case, you're going to sound like a nut job. So, I mean, it's the same way with like, and maybe, I think we probably will get into this later with like vaccine stuff. If you can't make the case, articulate your concerns for these things in a way that's like grounded, and it's like, it's right here, this is not, I'm not saying this is going to give you like autism or something. But if you can't do that, then you're going to be dismissed. And so it's so crucial to be able to calmly, rationally, and clearly, and like you said, I think is really important, succinctly articulate the criticisms or the arguments that we're trying to make if we want to have any buy-in whatsoever with people, because they only have so much time, they only have so much intellectual energy, and they only have so much emotional energy they can dedicate to hearing you out. And especially if they're already going to be on the defensive, they only have so much goodwill they're going to dedicate to trying to understand your point. So you have to be able to do that. And so I felt like that workshop, and I'm excited to go back and watch it. I know they're recording it. They're going to do like a video series and some corresponding like book. I think they said pamphlet. I don't know. The Michael Fallon guy, the Sovereign Nations guy, talked about what their plans were for it, which I didn't realize that was like the first one they're doing like that. So that was pretty cool.
That was awesome.
Be there for that. But I'm excited to go back through that and like my notes, especially because there's parts where I'm like, okay, he's talking so fast, I did not get all of that. To get some of those succinct like talking points from it, because it was really good. But it was like drinking through a fire hose is the way I worded it.
No, it was. And even though, I mean, I think you and I probably know this stuff already better than like the average person does, but he was going so quick. And I was so excited when they said, we're recording this, you don't have to worry about it. I was like, oh my God, I need to go back and watch this entire thing like 3 or 4 more times just to be able to get, and I mean, and honestly, like, I don't want to gush on James Lindsay too much, but that guy's a goddamn machine.
Totally.
Like,
Absolutely.
And I couldn't, I was sitting there going, what if, like, let's ponder a reality in which we don't have James Lindsay. Like, we just take that guy out of the equation. We like hit, like, I mean, I think sometimes it's difficult for people to really grasp that one singular person can actually make a difference just by like getting up and showing up every day and keeping his head down and focusing on what he's doing. And it's not like James Lindsay always had a platform like he does now. He has the platform he does because he just like, he is so focused on this thing. He's so focused on the outcome that he wants. And I feel like he's carrying the weight of a lot of people. And just like, I mean, honestly, like, thank God for James Lindsay. We would be completely screwed if it wasn't for him.
Yep. Yeah, he embodies, I tell people this often whenever it comes to this cultural fight, that they have to channel their inner John McClane, Bruce Willis's character in Die Hard, because there is this scene in the 4th Die Hard movie. It's a really good scene. You can find a clip of it on YouTube where Justin Long is his sidekick in that character, or in that movie. Justin Long plays his sidekick, and he's like, I'm not like you. I'm not a hero. I can't do all these things. And John McClane says, being a hero gets you this. You eat a lot of dinners alone. You get alienated. All these other things. You don't want to be. He says you don't want to be that guy. And so then, but the important part so Justin Long says, so why are you doing it? Why are we doing this? And this is what people need to channel is John McClane says, because no one else is doing it, because it has to be done. If there was someone else who was willing to do this better, believe me, I would say, let them do it, but no one else is doing this. It needs to be done. So right now we're doing it. And so and James Lindsay embodies that, where it's like, it has to be done. The question is, do I want to do it? That's not the question. The question is, does it need to be done? And am I a person capable of doing this? And so if you do it, that's what this moment requires of us, is to channel that mentality of, it's like, my personal interest in this or my enjoyment of it is not the proper question. The question is it necessary? And the answer is obviously yes. And I think he's someone who embraces that, it just has to be done. So why not?
Yeah. I think he embraces it. I think Chris Ruffo embraces it. Like, I think Pete Boghossian embraces it. Absolutely. Like, I mean, I've thought about this so much. Like, if Chris Ruffo hadn't come out like the ball of fire that he did and was doing all this media stuff, I'm like, that like I would have inserted myself into that role, and like I
Yep.
really don't want to do that. And so
Yep.
like I mean like thank God for people like him, Peter Boghossian. But you know what the thing is that that is starting to bother me about this whole situation, and I was having a conversation with someone who I'll keep anonymous for now.
Sure.
Last night on this topic, but there are all these organizations that are springing up to like quote unquote fight critical race theory now. And without naming any of them in particular, it's like I look at a lot of these organizations and I'm like, they're not really in it for the right reasons. They're in it because there's fundraising to be had off this. They're in it because there's an opportunity to be had on this. They're in it because it's a branding opportunity to stay relevant in whatever political genre they want to stay relevant in. But the thing that really worries me is a lot of these organizations aren't really doing as much as people believe they are to fight back. And that makes someone like, James Lindsay or Peter Boghossian or Chris Ruffo or any of these other people, it makes their role so much more important because they are actually showing up and making tangible progress. And I think what worries me so much is that, we have all these organizations that are popping up to quote unquote fight critical race theory or, whatever. And we have, people, states are passing these bills. You see all these videos of people speaking up at school board meetings. And I just continue, Truman, to be really worried that average people are not going to understand that we are losing incredibly badly. And they're going to see all this activity out there and say, oh, I don't need to step up and do it. Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is, and, I'd love your take on this because my perception of it is the people that are legitimately in it and are legitimately making progress on this are still so few and far between in the grand scheme of things because there's so many, like, pardon me being blunt, but like there's so many goddamn grifters.
Sure. Well, I mean, I will say, two things. One is if those groups are at least doing something, I would say, one is better than zero, right? Maybe they're not doing 10. Maybe they're claiming to be doing 30, that people think they're doing 10 and they're actually doing 1, but 1 is better than 0. So I would accept that if it's at least moving in the right direction. But I think your broader point that you said there is important to where people will see activity and identify that and like conflate it with like meaningful action or something substantive. Whenever I was doing collegiate ministry, we had this saying, we would say, look, emotion is no substitute for action. Action is no substitute for production, and production is no substitute for reproduction. So it's like, just because you feel a thing doesn't mean you did a thing. And just because you did a thing doesn't mean it was useful, right? Mm-hmm. And just because you did a useful thing doesn't mean it's something that can be reproduced and replicated to the necessary degree. And so like you don't want to confuse these things. And so I think you're right that people will see this activity and conflate it. And because they might have an emotional response to it or see someone have an emotional response to it, they'll conflate action with something actually productive, mm-hmm. And so fair enough with that. And I think that the broader issue, or I don't know if it's the broader issue, but the more long-term problem is what you said, where people will see this stuff and they will take it as an excuse to opt out of the fight.
Yes.
Because they will think these other people are doing it. And so they will think they don't have to show up. So they get this kind of bystander effect mm-hmm. kind of thing, perhaps if that's what you're referring to. And where they'll think, well, I don't have to go to the school board meeting. I have to do this. Well, my state passed a bill, right? So why do I have to do this kind of thing? So that's fine. I mean, that's going to happen no matter what. And I think that's why what matters is that we do have the people who are actually doing something. It's like, it's not that Chris Ruffo is doing stuff. It's not that James Lindsay is doing stuff, but ingrained in what they're saying is you need to be a part of this. It's like, it's not I'm doing this. It's they do such a good job bringing people with them in the fight. Mm-hmm. It's like, I'm not here to do this. I'm here to do this and equip you to do the same and bring you along with me so that you have some ownership in this fight. And you also have some tools that are part of it. So integral in what they're saying, it's not just fighting CRT. It's I'm here to help you do it mm-hmm. because you're doing it way more than I can do it. I mean, that's one of the things that James said at the end there. He's right. He's like, I'm here doing this in a hotel room in Tampa. What's more important, arguably, he's like, is you guys going home and taking this to your school system or your school board meetings, to your corporate boardrooms, to all of these other things, to your social groups, that's where it matters. So as long as that message is ingrained in there by the people that are kind of the ones leading the charge in a lot of ways, I don't worry as much about it, because it's going to be hard for people to make the argument to opt out and tag out if specific. I'm saying at least to make it, they can tell themselves that for sure. No, what I mean is it's going to be harder, I guess. I'm not saying it's going to be hard. People lie to themselves and they make excuses all the time. But I'm saying that if they're saying, well, if Chris Ruffo is doing it, then I don't have to. It's like, well, Chris Ruffo is saying you do have to. So clearly you don't even know what you're talking about if you're going to cite Chris Ruffo or because they're saying you need to be doing this.
Yeah.
Right. So that does encourage me, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
I mean, it does. I think that people are going to, maybe I'm just a little bit more cynical and black-pilled at the moment, I suppose. But I think that if people are given an excuse to opt out of doing something that's hard, they're going to take it. And they're going to take it every single time. And it's just like, I mean, I guess the point I want to make is like, people think there are so many people that are doing this. No, there's not. Yep. There's really not. I can count I probably don't even need to use my toes. I could probably count on my hands the amount of people that I legitimately think are actually making tangible progress in terms of fighting back against this thing. It's really not that many.
For the time being. But those people are leading, I think, growing. I think you made a video about this yesterday. About it's the COVID stuff is waking. It's one of the things that can cause miscarriage. Either way, they're leading. So, but my point is that this is super heavily curated information. I sound like a crazy person saying it, where it's like, hey, we don't have any data on this. We should probably look out, because you go to the CDC's website and they're like, we don't really have any information, but this is a personal choice, but we still recommend it. We recommend it. So that's the information people are operating on, is these compromised institutions.
To be really blunt, and I'm going to look like a heartless bitch saying this, but I don't care. I don't care. You want to know why? Because people have every opportunity to look into this. They have every opportunity. The information is out there. Like, what is it? Like 40% of people have not gotten this damn vaccine. Like, why haven't they gotten it? Like half of all healthcare providers haven't gotten this vaccine. Like, it's not as though the information is unavailable, but people have to look for it, and they have to be discerning, and they have to use their goddamn brains. And I'm sorry, if people take this vaccine and end up regretting it, well, congratulations, you entered yourself in for a fucking Darwin Award. I'm sorry. Like, my patience for people who just don't bother to look into things at all, not even doing the barest little bit of research, not challenging their own confirmation bias to say, maybe I should just look at sources that I might disagree with. Like, that's what I fucking did when I first started waking up, is I said, maybe I should just listen to the opinions of people that I think are the worst possible people in the world, just to see what they have to say. It's not like I have to agree with them. Let me just hear them out and see what they have to say. And I did that, and I found out, wait, these guys aren't really all that scary after all. Everyone can do what I did. Everyone can do this. It's just they have to make the choice to. And again, it's kind of like, for all the people that I hear complaining about all of this ad nauseum every single day, there are so few people who are actually stepping up and doing anything about it, that I'm kind of like, maybe it needs to get worse before it gets better. Maybe you all need to find out that this vaccine conversation was totally fucked from the very beginning. Maybe your kids do need to have mental health effects from you sending them to school for 2 years wearing a goddamn mask over their face. Maybe they do need to suffer that for you to finally get in the game and say something. Because all of these people who are going to have less than ideal outcomes from this entire situation, they've been sitting back and allowing it to happen for over a year and a half. And again, I understand I might sound really heartless in this equation, but how much rope do you want? How much rope do you want to hang yourself? Because you've been pulling a lot of rope for the last year and a half. You've been ignoring people like us that have been telling you that this is going on. You've been vilifying us. You've been canceling us. You've been doing all this stuff. Even, I know I'm going to bring it up, even on the right, every time I tell them this stuff, every time I point out, listen, conservatives or progressives driving the speed limit, as Michael Malice always says, they'll give them 2 years. They're going to be completely in favor of critical race theory. Kristi Noem has now come out basically talking like a rhino. She was their golden child for a week and a half. Even the right is susceptible to this stuff, right? And it's you try to tell them, no, the Daily Wire is not the best source of information because Ben Shapiro is just trying to protect his goddamn social status. I'm sorry, that's what he's doing. has no interest in looking into this stuff at all, because all he's interested in doing is protecting this little thing.
Reactionary bubble thing.
Yeah, it's this reactionary bubble thing that they've cultivated for themselves. Like Truman, I'm ceasing to have any sort of compassion for people who have been presented more opportunities than they damn well needed to look into this, to think for themselves, to consider other points of view, to just be reasonable people for a second. Like, if it needs to get worse for it to get better, so be it, then it has to get worse.
Sure. So let me clarify, because I'm also about to sound really heartless, or at least not nearly as altruistic as I might have made myself seem here. Yes, I am worried about the pregnant women. I am worried about those things, obviously. What I'm saying is, because those people won't do the research, won't do that, the pressure from their corporations, their businesses. So here's the progression. All right. Because of everything you just said, because people are ignorant and lazy and apathetic. Okay. It's just human nature. I'm like that. I can be, just not in this area right now. So because of that, they are going to comply. Compliance will be the norm. We're going to see more and more of that. Okay. So my main thing here I'm thinking about, I'm worried about the unintended consequences or the ignorance of the people who are getting this. Okay. But I'm thinking long-term about us. I'm thinking about my wife. Okay. I'm thinking about what happens whenever all of those ignorant people have complied, and all that's left of society is a minority of holdouts like us. And they've hold on. They have laid the foundation with these news articles and with this resentment they are manufacturing. They are turning this problem of the unvaccinated. They are sowing the seeds for this. Okay. So they're sowing the seeds right now, the problem of the unvaccinated, so that people are going to be ripe for a solution to be given to them. For us, I'm thinking about us in this and what this is going to mean for us. If those people want to take those risks on themselves, that's fine. But like I've said before, if you want to piss in your own pool, that's fine. But these people are pissing in my pool. So I'm worried about what I'm going to be put into as this underclass of society because of these people's ignorance, because of this curated information, because of the gated institutional narrative and the distributed information suppression complex. I'm worried about that, because whenever we only have 20, 30% of the population as holdouts, and you have, that this super organized minority against this unorganized majority, by that point, enough people will have gone along with it that it's like they're going to be like, yeah, let's just do what we have to do if these dregs are holding us back. So I'm not like, the root of what I'm saying is really, I'm worried about my future and my wife's future and my kids,
Hey,
so do you see what I'm saying?
I've got a solution for you. You can move to the free state of New Hampshire, where we just banned vaccine passports and mandates.
Well, sure. No, and I live in Wyoming, and so I'm that's fine. But I'm saying that's for the time being. That's for the time being.
I mean, I honestly, I think that's the only solution for the problem right now, is people have got to start manning up and either doing something to fight back or getting the F out. Like, I have absolutely no fear at all that I'm going to be in a situation where I'm mandated to get a vaccine. I mean, maybe like the only thing that I'm really concerned about is like being able to fly, honestly, and as long as I can fly, I'm going to be fine. But I live in New Hampshire. Like, this has already been outlawed here. The governor signed the bill like last week. And so, I mean, if people are really worried about it, well, they get thee to a libertarian state, because again, like, people have got to start taking responsibility for their own experiences here. Like, you live in Wyoming, you're going to be fine. People who live in Florida, probably going to be fine. People who live in Texas, I mean, if people keep moving to California or from California to Texas, who knows what's going to happen there. But like, there are places that you can go, and people have got to start we can frame this in as many different ways as we like, but at the end of the day, it's just going to come back to personal responsibility for me. Like, I live in a state where this stuff is going to be outlawed. I've taken responsibility for that. I've taken personal responsibility for speaking up against these things when I think that it is important to do so, and speaking up in a way that I think is going to be most conducive to actually making progress. You're doing the same thing. If everyone out there was doing the same thing that you and I were doing right now, we would actually have no problem on our hands. But until people start taking personal responsibility, like, I just don't see an end to this. And this is why I keep saying, like, the only way we have out of this is to wake up people on the left. That's the only way out, is to wake up more people on the left. And right now, the right is making that goddamn near impossible. And so until they start like acting in a way that is going to be helpful for the outcome they want, I just don't know that there's a lot that we can do to help them.
So I want to ask you a question, because there's probably something here that I am misunderstanding.
Yeah.
So we've talked about like the conservatives and like, you know, the ignorant conservatives who it's like, I'm going to sit on my porch with my gun and they're going to wake the sleeping giant, you know, and they don't, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so those are the people who it's like this fundamentally naive, that they think that they can avoid this or that it's not going to come for them eventually. So how would you separate what you just said about how you live in New Hampshire, I live in Wyoming, right? How is that not a macro, just a larger version of the sitting on your porch with your shotgun and saying that this isn't going to impact us because our state right now is okay? Like how are those two different thoughts?
Because I think that you know, fundamentally, I believe that we should be trying to return more power to state and local governments. I don't believe it should exist on the federal level. I mean, that was the whole point of creating the United States of America, was that like local and state governments had much more control and frankly much more power. And so I don't actually think it's that different. If we're working within this system in which, you know, we are advocating for, then we should be focusing on the state and local level. I don't want the federal government to have power over everyone all across the country unless it's like it makes sense for the national defense or things like that. So I do think it is a little bit different. I think that it's about making the conscious choice to work where you can be the most effective. And of course, there's things that you know, both you and I and a lot of people can do for the national front as well. And I think, you know, part of doing podcasts like this or creating content or being out there, we're not just trying to have part in our local state conversation. We are trying to be like more broad than that. But at the same time, you know, when I'm focusing on getting bills passed, it's going to be in the New Hampshire House that is going to be my first stop, because that's where I'm able to have the most impact.
I mean, fair enough. I think you're right. I guess what I'm getting at is it still seems like we can't, and I don't think we are, based on exactly what you just said, but that we can't ignore the national implications of these things and like the cascade effect, because I'm thinking about like what happens when that day comes. So much of what I think about is just trajectories, social trajectories. Where are we going as a society? How sustainable is it? How tenable is this? How can we have a system of shared governance if these trends continue as a collective of states with these increasingly opposing values? And the thing that I think I put this on Locals or on Twitter, I can't remember which, but where it's like the thought that I have in my head is fundamentally different religious beliefs can coexist unless one of them is, as part of its doctrine, is openly hostile against another one. So like Sunnis and Shiites. Yeah. And so like we are increasingly in this situation where the left is this, like, as part of their orthodoxy and their tenets, is adding a tenet that you have to be hostile to these irregular, these dregs, these unvaccinated, unwashed masses of society. And so I'm just thinking about, like I said, even 3-4 months from now, but let's go 6 months from now. And, you know, and maybe, so again, processing out loud, maybe the way that this, like, if things get real, I know that for some reason the word, I know this is a stupid word that kids use, but I'm like, I think this fall is going to be lit in terms of like the social conflicts and the erosions to the social fabric further ripping. But maybe that will have an impact on the tone of the 2022 midterms. That, you know, like you said, maybe it'll wake enough people up that the people who are elected are the ones who are like, we're not going to do this stuff. So I guess that's a possibility for sure. And I think that kind of upside exists and is worth talking about. But either way, I'm thinking about just the sustainability of this kind of, okay, conservatives are, or anyone who's like, you know, center left or whatever, they're racist or misogynist or bigots. That's fine. Okay. That just means you're a bad person. Then January 6th, you're a terrorist sympathizer, and you're a conspiracy theorist. And now with this stuff, you're an anti-vaxxer who's spreading the Delta space AIDS and is going to kill us. Like that gives a lot of people permission to do unspeakable things to the out group. And,
Yes.
and I'm in that group, and so are you. And so that's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, but again, it's because that out group is not fighting back. It's because this out group continues to try to play within the parameters that the left has set for them. And I'm sorry, this is their own goddamn fault. They have every fucking... I'm sorry, I'm just going to be militant on this point. They have every ability to do something differently, and they continue to make excuses for why they can't. And, oh, the left is going to say this, the left is going to say that, the left is going to say that other thing. I'm sorry, like, put on your big boy pants and start acting like a goddamn adult. Just because the left says something, just because they say you're a racist, you're a white supremacist, you're a terrorist sympathizer, you're any of these things, doesn't mean you have to accept that. And
Sure.
I'm just really getting tired of like accepting this as an excuse, accepting that you're afraid of being called a racist. Like, it is 2021. This has been going on for how many years now? Where you were overtly
racist.
called, everything is goddamn racist. Like, when are you going to get over your fear of being called a racist? Like, just stop worrying about it. And again, it's like, if you are not contributing something differently, this is the lesson that I try, and I feel like I bang my head against the wall trying to teach this lesson to the right, like, all the goddamn time. If you are contributing in the same way over and over and over and over and over again, and you're not changing your contribution, you're not changing how you're showing up, you're not changing what you're giving to the situation, you're not changing what you're saying, you're not changing how you're fighting back, you're not changing who you're talking to, you're not changing any of these things, and you're expecting a different result, that is the very definition of insanity. And you're doing it at the same time that, I'm sorry, the right is vilifying anyone that is on the left. Like, they call them names all the time. They rip them down. They rip me down for pointing out that they're behaving like idiots. Like, do you expect the people to come onto your team or not? Because you're not behaving in a way that is conducive for anyone to join your team. In fact, what you're actually doing is driving away every new person that you got to vote for you in the 2020 election. You're actively driving them away. So do I really believe that they want a solution to this based on watching their behaviors? Because, like, I don't listen to what people say. I don't care what you say most of the time. If your behaviors are not backing up the words that you're using, then I'm going to look at your behaviors first and foremost. And your behaviors will tell me what you want to happen in a situation. And I think we've talked about this before. If I haven't talked about it with you, I've talked about it with a million other people. The right wants to lose. They want to lose. This is the only conclusion that I can draw based on their behaviors. And so if they're showing up in a way that is only going to lead to them driving people away, pissing people off, losing votes, losing support, if they're only supporting through their actions what the left is trying to do, then I can make no other assumption than they want to lose and they want this to happen. Well, you know what? Sometimes we have to get what we want in order to realize that that's not really what we want. And again, like, if the right has to lose, if the left wins seats in 2022, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I would not be surprised at all. Same. And in fact, I absolutely think that I would rather the right lose in 2022 than in 2024. Yeah. I would rather they learn a lesson. Now, are they going to learn that lesson? Probably not, but it's their own damn fault.
So the only addendum I would add, or that I would make to the right wants to lose, is I would say they're ambivalent to victory.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's that they want to lose, but they show no interest in victory and strategies that will lead to victory. That it's like, they might not want to lose, but they don't want to win hard enough to make it happen. So it's like 6 one hand, half dozen the other. But I think those are different things. Actively trying to sabotage your team, like during a football game, if I'm a quarterback, and just I'm throwing interceptions on purpose, is very different than being so disinterested in victory that I just suck. And I think that most people on the right are just ambivalent to victory because they don't understand what's at stake, because they think they can sit on their porch with their shotgun, basically. But
maybe.
Okay, so here's a question I have for you. Because I agree, and we talked about this last time, that there are people on the left that have to be woken up. I think that there is probably a symmetrical amount of people on the right that would fall in the same category for different reasons, but we don't have to go back over that. But let's focus on the left and the potential converts or people who could understand the stuff from the left. So in your mind, if you picture someone who is somehow still on the left, still self-identifies a Joe Biden voter who, I mean, if you think about that person and just how they even conceptualize the pandemic, how they conceptualize George Floyd and the riots and stuff, how they conceptualize the election, how they conceptualize January 6th. And again, let's just focus on the pandemic for a minute. And, you know, these are the type of person who will probably say Trump's bungled pandemic response without knowing exactly what they're talking about there. If a person is still in that place, if they are still like a Jesse Singal or something like that, Sam Harris, if they're still in that place and everything to date has not been, you know, like they were on board with, these are the people who are probably driving in the car by themselves with a mask on.
Right.
So, like, what do you see as the thing that's gonna, like, to me, that person is like, they're gone, man. They are really far gone. So
I think something
help me understand what you're seeing here with that group. That is, if you're still in that category and think about all the boxes they checked to still be in that category, all of the things they've ignored, all of the things they went along with on the other side of that, like, that's a pretty long list of like, are you serious? Are you like because they've blew by so many red pill checkpoints for other people, right? There's a million red pill checkpoints that other people woke up at that they just blew by and were like, la la la, whistling through the graveyard. So like, what is left that they, you know what I mean? Like, what am I missing? How do we get those people then?
So I think the reality is that I don't have a whole lot of hope for someone like Jesse Singal or Sam Harris, to be honest. And I'm going to tell you why, because I think it involves experiencing pain on some level to wake up. I mean, look at like, I mean, I don't follow Brett Weinstein as like closely as you do, so I don't know where he is on this journey, but it seems as though his YouTube channel getting demonetized may have caused him a little bit of pain and may have like pushed him a little further down that red pill path that I think we're all hoping that he's going to take at some point. But like, I look at someone like Sam Harris. Sam Harris can run his mouth on the internet all day, every day, do whatever he wants to do, and he's going to be fine. Like, financially, he's going to be fine. He's already established. This is not like he has to break through or anything. Like, he can do whatever he wants to and not experience pain, and he can pretty well shield himself from the pain that like average people that like you and I would experience in this regard. So I think in order to wake someone up, it requires them experiencing pain. And so what I'm seeing from just like, because I really I don't like focusing my energy on like influencers. I think it's like a lost cause, to be honest. But like, you know, if I'm talking to like just normal people, like, you know, I did the video the other day about these two women from New York City that they're experiencing pain. They're, you know, would consider themselves to be progressive or at least on the left, and they just want to send their kids to school. That's it.
Yeah.
And the New York City keeps moving the goalposts about when they're going to be able to send their kids back to school, and are they going to have to wear masks and things like that. They're starting to experience pain. And I think really for most people that are still clinging to this idea that the Democrats are the good guys or the left are the good guys, they need to experience the pain that's going to come along with this. And that's why, like, I don't necessarily think it's like a bad thing that things are going to get worse. Is it going to suck for a little while? Yeah. But like for people like you and I that we're kind of insulated in our like communities, it'll probably suck a little bit less because we are in a geographic place where it's going to be like we're like more libertarian or conservative or what have you. But sometimes people need to experience pain in order to push them back on the right track. And so I honestly think that the worse this gets, I actually think, you know what? I'm going to say it. Like, if they do another round of lockdowns, good. That's going to red pill a lot of Democrats.
So let's talk about that, because pain happens when you meet resistance, right? So I'm lifting weights and I'm, as you're, you know, doing some kind of exercise, you're running, whatever, you experience pain through the resistance you're meeting. Right. So think about even just in a relationship, if you meet resistance with, you know, someone who you know have a conflict is resistance. So they say no and you're thinking yes, or, you know, they say Chinese food whenever you're thinking Italian, that's resistance. So pain comes from tension, comes from conflict, right? So back to what you said earlier about how most people are ignorant and will just comply with this stuff, how many? So let's try to do some kind of charting out the numbers here. All right. We're not gonna use numbers, but we'll just say groups, portions of a portion of a portion. Right. So you have people on the left still, someone who's still in that category, let's take like my dad or someone who is just totally all in, like, yeah, CNN's propaganda now. Thank God NPR and the New York Times are still pure. So, and my dad's now back to wearing masks because of the Delta space aids, even though he's fully vaccinated.
Show your dad the article about NPR now allowing their journalists to be activists.
Yeah, no, I saw. No, he's. I've sent him so many things. I'm like, hey, this is what I mean when I say NPR is intellectually bankrupt, and he'll just be like a thumbs up emoji. Like it doesn't. These are religious.
Bless his heart. Bless his heart.
These are religious conversations. So anyway, so we have a group of people who are inexplicably still on the left and still think, like you said, this is the good guys. All right.
Right.
The vast majority of them will comply with these things. Would you say that's fair? Okay.
Yes.
Even within that group that will comply, we could say that a good portion of them, I don't know how many, but a good portion of them won't be happy about it. So if you're talking about lockdowns, they won't be happy about it. Right?
Yeah.
Because this is inhibiting their freedom. So this goes back to the thing I was saying earlier. Of that group who's not happy about it, how many of them are going to channel their frustration at the government and be red-pilled? And how many of them who they've been seeing all these articles about the unvaccinated and the dregs who are spreading and the Trump supporters and the conservatives are going to just channel that resentment towards us? Right? So my point is that I feel like the majority are going to comply and keep on this path. They're going to keep blowing by those red pill pit stops. Of that, there's still a majority are not going to be happy about going into those lockdowns. But even within that, most of those people are either going to channel that frustration towards us, or just stay oblivious or whatever. I think that most of them, like, what percentage are actually going to go, yeah, now I don't trust CNN and NBC and, and the CDC. Now I don't. You know what I mean? So I think that
probably a really small percent. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that if lockdowns happen again, it will be a thing that will have a visceral reaction. But I think they're already priming the population to channel that resentment to us, man.
Probably.
So I don't see that as a red pill thing. I see that as like a blood red thing, But
I don't necessarily disagree with the premise, Truman. But at the same time, it's kind of like we can only how I kind of approach this stuff is like I can only control what I'm putting into it. And you can only control what you're putting into it. And we can't, like, I don't want to spend and this might be like an overtly selfish thing. I don't want to spend my days worrying that people are going to hate me because I didn't get a shot in my arm that they wanted me to get when I barely leave my house when I'm home anyway. Like, I'm just not going to, I'm not going to spend my time worrying about that. It just doesn't make sense to me. Could that be an eventual reality? Well, sure. But worrying about that is just going to distract me from focusing on what I want to focus on, which is like, fighting back against critical race theory and building stuff to do that and building community to do that and all that stuff. It's just going to be distracting from the larger issue. Sure. So I don't necessarily disagree with you that I think absolutely the populace could be primed to turn against the people who are the unvaccinated dregs of society. We're going to be like Demolition Man living down in the sewers before too long. But at the same time, it's kind of like, again, this is their own damn fault. And at some point,
it's not my fault, and it's not your fault. That's my point.
No, but it is their fault.
Yeah. But it's going to be projected to us. That's what I'm saying here.
But we're already going to be
projected to us.
Yeah, but we're already going to be in a more advantageous. We're already going to be in a more advantageous position anyway, because we have taken responsibility for our contribution. We've taken responsibility for our life. Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah. So then back to the original question that I asked you, or just the pile of crap that I dumped on you. That's not even a question. So help me understand where I'm seeing this as like the immediate thing, because of when a lot of these mandates are coming into effect. It's like by September 30th, a lot of these places, it's like you have 60 days to do this.
Right.
So it seems to me we're going to hit a threshold of this being like the boiling point where like this is going to reach an impasse a lot sooner than CRT will. I think this is going to reach a thing where it's like, I use this example from, have you ever seen the movie Stranger Than Fiction with Will Ferrell and Dustin Hoffman?
I don't think I did actually.
Maggie Gyllenhaal. Okay, so it's an amazing movie. I think it might be my favorite movie of all time. And so Will Ferrell is this guy who his life, he realizes he's just a boring accountant. He works for the IRS, and he starts hearing his life being narrated. And he realizes he's in a story. And so Dustin Hoffman is this literature professor that agrees to help him. And he says, you need to figure out if you are the one driving the story or if someone else is driving the story. So he says, you need to stay at home, do nothing, and see if the plot finds you. If something happens to you that's going to force you to react, then that will tell us if you're the one in control or if something else is in control.
Mm-hmm.
So I give these examples of when the plot is going to find us, of something that is going to force a reaction. Social Security becoming insolvent is one of them. If the weightlifter, the transgender weightlifter in the Olympics wins all the golds, that's going to be one of them that's going to force a response, I think. Some type of student loan bubble, that's going to force a response. If this vaccination mandates with these corporations happening, and like when the deadlines, and what happens if so many people do it and there's only a small minority left, the plot's going to find us, because it's like, what do we do about those people? And then if a bunch of people say no, the plot's going to find us. It's going to be, what do we do about all these people saying no? So then do we enforce it or do we backpedal? My point is, so what I'm asking you is, like, the vaccine stuff and the mandates seem like they are way more immediate. Like they are right now, and the reaction to them is going to be right now. And that fight, and what's going to happen with this is going to have an answer and going to reach a some type of inflection point a lot sooner than what's going to happen with CRT, just because of it has like these tangible dates and times like attached to it.
Maybe.
And so does that make sense? So that's why I'm thinking about it in terms of that, and why it's like become the thing on the front of my mind, and where I say they're both part of the underlying ideology of the same thing. It's authoritarian top-down control, central planning of the lives of the citizenry.
Right. But
this thing, it seems like the mandates and the new, and like you said, potential lockdowns, I think they're priming us for more lockdowns. I think you're exactly right. That seems like it's going to reach an inflection point a lot faster than the CRT fight is. So that's why it's there. So, I mean, tell me, what do you think about that? Well, if I'm wrong, why? If I'm not, then like,
no,
does that not worry you? What do you think is going to happen?
It doesn't worry me, because I think that things need to get worse before they get better. To be honest, that is the main reason why this doesn't worry me at all, is that I think that this is all part of the same fight. I don't think whether or not it's like they get to the vaccine stuff first, or they get to the CRT stuff first, or they get to something else first. For me, this is all part of the same fight. This is all part of, like,
I agree.
All of this is about, controlling the populace, getting the populace to a place where they will comply with any order the government gives them, thank them for their handout and their UBI and whatever else the government gives them at the end of the day. I think that's what all of this is about. And frankly, creating a populace that's too stupid to be able to challenge and fight back. I mean, the CRT fight is a much bigger picture, simply because it involves the school system. And so that's not a fight that's like a slow burn sort of thing, where I do agree with you that this vaccine thing has a much bigger chance of blowing up in our faces a lot sooner. But I actually think that that's a good thing. Sure. I think it's a good thing. I think accelerationism in this capacity is a good thing, because I think that the more you life is about balance, right? So if things go too far in one direction, that's going to cause a reaction on the other side. And so if imposing restrictions and mandates and taking away freedom and taking away liberty and telling people they can't run their businesses and telling people they can't work and telling people they can't travel and doing this, that, and the other thing is going to if that is going to incite the populace to actually start standing up for themselves and fighting back, then I actually think that that's a good thing. And, I think a lot about a lot of these issues just on a spiritual level first, before I think about it in terms of like human practical terms. And in spiritual circles, there's this idea of like, how far will a person be pushed before they learn how to self-empower themselves? How far will they be pushed before they start expressing themselves? How far does it have to go? And I think what we've seen in the past several years is that, frankly, it has to go pretty effing far for a lot of people. And so if I believe, as I do, that people are not going to stand up for themselves until they're pushed to a certain point, then let's push them off that cliff. Let's push their back against a wall. It's a situation they've created for themselves. No one's done it to them. They've done it to themselves. So let's just get there quicker and at least get the resolution quicker. And again, like, it might be painful in the interim, but it needs to be painful in order for people to start changing their behaviors. Like, moving through cognitive dissonance is painful. It can be it's emotionally exhausting. It can actually be physically painful. But like, if the pain that the government or whoever else is causing you is more painful than the pain you're going to experience from moving through cognitive dissonance, which is what you need to do to take the red pill, then that's the only way that you're going to take the red pill. So fine, let's cause some people some pain.
But they have an out against the pain in the form of compliance, and people are opting.
No, they don't.
What are you talking about?
There'll always be another thing.
Well, no, but
once you bend
right.
one thing, there will always be another thing after that, and another thing after that.
Totally. But my point is that even that pain, because of the way information is curated, is that they are given a target from which to aim that resentment and the source of their, like, they, it's that thing that these people are arsonists disguised as firefighters. And so, like, the policymakers here, and so they are helping curate and, like, foster this thing where it's like, you're like you said, people are experiencing that pain creates a response. But if they're being told what to do, if they're already being primed of where to channel their response, then it doesn't create change, at least not good change. So then let's go back to, if you remember, the question I asked during the Q&A in Tampa was, I asked about risk management and understanding your risks and gambling. So something you said kind of resonated with me. You said people are too stupid, or they just don't know. They're not educated enough to know, like, what they're gambling with, or their freedom and what's going on. So the question I asked James was about how, like, so in Thinking Fast and Slow, Kahneman and Tversky talk about how people are risk seeking if they don't perceive that they have much to lose, and they're risk averse if they do perceive they have a lot to lose. And right now, people do not think they have much to lose in terms of giving up essential liberty for little temporary safety. So they're willing to gamble heavily with liberty, but it's not just their liberty. It's our liberty. And they're willing to gamble heavily with it to get this false sense of safety from the, lockdowns or whatever thing. So how do we get people, because I agree with you when you say fight is the same fight. Mm-hmm. CRT, this thing, climate activism, whatever you want to call it, like, all of this stuff is the same fight. It's freedom versus tyranny, independence versus having your life planned out for you. Like, so you're right. You're absolutely right. So how do we maybe this is the question, is how do we strip the specifics of some of these fights away to get to the central root of it for people, to where it's like, freedom is way more preferable. Yes, it comes with risk. You have a higher chance of failure. You have a higher chance of harm, with freedom, but it is way better than the alternative, which is we're all equally destitute, miserable, and in servitude. Mm-hmm. So how do we get to the root of that then, whether it's with the vaccine stuff and the mandates and the lockdowns, or the CRT thing, or anything else? How do we help foster a population that returns to this place where they understand the necessity of liberty, they understand the desirability of freedom and liberty over their own lives, over having it dictated to them? Because we're talking about just a huge cultural shift that's going to be required to get there. I mean, is the answer still it has to get worse before it gets better? I mean, there has to be, I think you're right generally, but, like, even just in practical terms, like, how do we conceptualize that fight and bring it back to that in, like, simplest terms?
The only way it's going to get better is if it gets worse first. That's it. And that's not the answer that you want, and I know that's not the answer that people want, but we can't force people to wake up. We can't force people to see information that they don't want to see. We can't force people to consider perspectives they don't want to consider. We can't force people, if they are committed to listening to everything CNN and MSNBC and NPR and the New York Times tells them, that is their choice. The only thing that we can control is what we're giving to the situation, is in making podcasts like this and making content like this, in terms of having conversations. That is all that we can control. And we have to hope that we inspire other people to do the same thing, to be having these conversations with their friends and family, to be making content themselves, to be doing all these things. That is literally the only thing that we can control. And if we are going to place our metric of success on how many people did we, wake up today, that's not going to be a successful thing, because we don't have control over that aspect. The only thing that we can control is what we're giving to the situation. And, that doesn't mean that, this has been going on for decades. They've been doing this for decades. They play this so slow, and we can't expect that we can turn it around and just drop some truth bombs and that people are going to wake up from it, right? Because people have been trying for decades of their lives to be asleep. It's like in They Live. What happened in They Live when the woman put on the sunglasses for the first time? She kicked Roddy Piper's ass out of her apartment because she was so freaked out. Then she came around later, right?
That movie has the great it's time I've come to kick ass and to chew bubble gum, and I'm all out of gum. Yes. Bubble gum, yeah. Mm-hmm. So fair enough. I agree with you. Two things that are just questions, right? So the first thing is, we can only control our contribution to it, okay? Mm-hmm. But our contribution has to be oriented towards a specific goal. So that was my question, is like how do we most efficiently orient the contribution towards the most likely goal, or towards the most practical goal, or the most effective goal? So that's the first thing. And the second thing is about if it has to get worse before it gets better, which I agree with you. And that's why some of this accelerationism stuff I do agree with. That's why, like, when someone, I think it was Boyce, was like, yeah, well, this is bad to have these people at the Olympics. I'm like, no, but we need it. We need it because it'll accelerate the conversation. Mm-hmm. So I agree with you, but it has to get worse. There's a threshold to whatever that worst thing it gets to becomes irreversible. Mm-hmm. It becomes irreversible. So how do we embrace the idea of it has to get worse before it gets better, while still understanding the point where it's like, if it gets to this point, there is no getting better in our lifetime. So to protect against that, and to orient that contribution in such a way that it's cognizant of those things. Does that make sense? Like, mm-hmm. there is some specificity there that I'm trying to figure out, because I don't know what the answer is, but I know that that's part of it. So again, I'm sorry, I'm just like working a lot of this stuff out in my head.
I don't think things are going to get better in either of our lifetimes. That's not the fight that we're in. Because again, like this started decades ago. This started
talk about that. Yeah.
Well, this started like, if we're thinking about, like, this started like 50, 60 years ago, something like that, where, like, in earnest, these ideas were starting to be pushed in the education system. So we now have, several generations of people who have gone through the education system learning these ideas. These ideas have been percolating. And now it's like they've been, you know what it is? It's like War of the Worlds. You remember that movie? Yep. Well, it was obviously based on like a book and then a play and all this stuff, but like the movie with Tom Cruise in it, which I actually thought was a really good movie. So
Tim Robbins, not my blood.
Yeah, no, that was a kick-ass movie. And but the whole premise of War of the Worlds, right, is that aliens, decades, eons, who knows how long ago, like, buried these machines on Earth that then we built up all these cities around, and they've been sitting there for decades and decades and decades. And then all of a sudden, one day, the alien being shoots down on a bolt of lightning, gets into the machine, they come up from the ground, and they start killing everything and everyone. And there's like nothing that we can do against it, because they had laid the plot to do this for decades. That is literally what we're dealing with right now. Sure. They laid this plot decades ago. They buried the machines. We built up entire systems around the machines. We protected the machines. We coddled the machines. We made sure that the machines were taken care of until they needed them. And now they've ridden down on their bolts of lightning. They're in the machines. The machines are starting to wake up, and they're going to start killing everyone. That is the situation that we are in. This is not a problem that was created overnight. It is not a problem that will be destroyed overnight. And I think that, like, part of the thing that's so challenging about all of this is that I think that I think that we need to become comfortable fighting like in that space and setting our goals based on setting our expectations based on the idea that this is not a problem that is going to be solved in our lifetimes. It's just not. It's too big. It's been going on for too long. It's too ingrained. And so if we build our expectation around like this is going to be solved next week or next month or next year, like we're lost at that point. So
There's a difference between expecting it's going to be solved and attempting to address it. I don't think it's going to be solved anytime soon either.
Well, I'll tell you when it's not going to be solved anytime in the next 3 years, 3.5 years. It's not going to be solved until bare minimum, or like we're not going to have any progress on this until bare minimum 2024.
What do you think?
2025, actually, January 2025 at the absolute earliest.
What's your current, like, how do you see, do you think, so here's something that confused me.
Mm-hmm.
So when the CDC came out like 3 or 4 days ago and said vaccinated people are shedding just as much of the virus as unvaccinated, I was astounded that they admitted that.
Because they can.
Well, they didn't have to say that at all. They could have just ignored it like they did with the menstrual cycle stuff.
Of course they can.
With the side effects.
Of course they can. Do the people that need to hear that, are they even registering that reality? Most of them?
And when CNN covered it, it's hilarious. So the way CNN wrote the article was, new data highlights the need to get vaccinated now more than ever. And I'm like,
no, it's not what it does at all, CNN, actually.
It's like when NPR wrote the thing about how the inflation shows how great our economic growth is. I'm like, that's a non sequitur. That is not how that works. Mm-hmm. So fair enough. But what do you think the information landscape is going to look like? So, because a lot of this also comes down to that, right? Mm-hmm. In terms of people waking up. So just kind of the thing I mentioned earlier about the CDC and some of the stuff around vaccines, but I mean, you can take it on any topic. You mentioned Brett getting demonetized. I don't know if you saw, so here's one thing that is encouraging that Dave Rubin, that Locals, did you see Locals is like you and Rumble are merging basically?
I saw that. I don't know. Like, I trust Dave implicitly, but I went on Rumble last night. So I have a Rumble channel and I kind of started ignoring it because they don't monetize anything. And like, it's a pain in the ass to upload anything on it. And I don't even understand how that website works to begin with. So Dave announced this thing and I was like, shit, I got to give Rumble another shot because I've basically been ignoring it. I went back on Rumble and it's exactly the same thing as it always was. So I don't have, like, as of right now, unless Rumble makes some major changes, it is a shitty interface on a shitty platform that doesn't that is just like, I don't even understand how to use it from a user perspective, let alone from a content creator perspective. They don't even have any sort of like importer built from YouTube. So it's going to be an extra step for me to put content on there anyway. I don't know about that whole thing. Maybe if they improve even just from a user perspective, it is a shitty platform. I'm sorry, Dave, but it is a shitty platform currently, as of August 1st, 2020. So maybe it'll improve, but I don't see Rumble taking over YouTube in its current form at all.
Totally. So, I mean, my what I was getting at is that, and I literally have never even been on it, so I don't know. My understanding of what they're doing there is that Rumble is going to be, the synthesis is that Rumble gets the framework for subscription and like monetization stuff. So that's where you get the monetizing from, is from Locals.
Rumble's getting that from Locals. Ain't monetizing shit. So.
No, but they're basically using Locals as a version of Patreon for their Rumble stuff. So you can monetize your Rumble account and the infrastructure is there through Locals. And Locals is getting Rumble servers, so they don't have to be on AWS servers anymore.
Oh,
but that's just another thing.
Okay, that makes more sense.
But my point, and I think they're probably going to use Rumble for this like Locals TV stuff they're wanting to do.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm thinking about the information landscape, and what do you think the information landscape is going to be? Because here's the other part, and why I bring up the vaccine stuff is because the US is encouraging, and they're encouraging all these people to get this experimental vaccine, they've already made it to where no pharmaceutical company can be sued for anything that happens from these experimental vaccines. Okay, fair enough. But what happens whenever they do realize that the side effects are way more widespread than they'd originally documented? Again, I'm thinking about women's reproductive systems. Specifically, someone told me something about inflammation in young men's cardiovascular system, but I haven't seen anything about that. So I will just say I don't know about that. But this other thing I do see a lot of red flags about. So what happens with the information landscape in terms of all of a sudden you have all these women that are like, okay, I'm permanently screwed up, or but my point is that they're not going to come out and say, yeah, we effed up, guys. They're going to, and especially these, because unless there's something right now to keep the company. So here we know the pharmaceutical companies are protected, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're Google and you mandate that your employee has to take it in order to work there, that's a form of coercion. Can the employee sue Google? So now Google, who is the information distributor, is in a position where they have to suppress the information about any of these things. So I'm also thinking about the information landscape.
Well, no, because the government's helping them too, because there was a moment where OSHA was saying that if your employer mandated you get a vaccine and you got hurt from that you could file workers' compensation. So there was a moment where the government was like, they were trying to hold the employers responsible. And that moment quickly subsided when OSHA's like, oh, we're not going to enforce this rule until 2022. So again, I have to come back to the only solution to this is personal responsibility. And if people get hurt as a result of listening to an employer, and by the way, listen, I turned down a $20,000 training job because they were mandating the vaccine. I'm sorry, and it wasn't even a hard decision for me. It was no, you don't get to tell me to make a medical decision for 3 hours of my time, because that's literally when we're going to be in contact. It's 3 hours of my time. Everything before that is prep. Everything after that is just debrief. You don't get to mandate my medical choices for that. And it wasn't even it didn't even cross my mind to say, well, maybe I can just go get the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and it will be fine. No, just no. You don't get to mandate that. And until people start standing up for themselves and saying no, then they get what they get. And I'm sorry that people didn't look into it. I'm sorry that people, if it affects women's fertility, I barely even want to have a kid, and yet I've somehow brought myself to look up information to confirm about whether or not it would impact my ability to do so, right? If people are not making these bare minimum efforts to even just use their common sense, Truman, and say these vaccines have not been in development long enough for it to even be known the impact on pregnancy, or the impact on fertility, or the impact on children once they're born. We have no idea, simply because there has not been time. If people are not willing to exercise that basic level of common sense, then nothing can do it for them, right? And so again, I have to say, this comes down to people exercising personal responsibility. And as much as people like you and I might want to, take this pain away from them,
sure,
if they don't experience it first, I really think that's the only way that's going to wake people up, is to experience some level of pain.
Did you notice in your research, I noticed this, that whether it was the CDC's website, to bring it back to the critical theory, or any of these articles, every single article I found that talked about this, it was always pregnant persons.
Really?
Never pregnant women, always pregnant persons, including on the CDC's website. I'm like, this is serious. We're just going to make all these changes here.
Mm-hmm.
Pregnant persons, not we're just going to continue to eliminate women as a class of people. And did you see that the AMA, the American Medical Association, about how taking gender off of, or sex, taking sex off of birth certificates?
That's so stupid.
What do you think about that, man? I mean, even just, and what did you find whenever you're researching that about the potential risk to fertility, which bully for you on actually doing that research yourself?
Well, I mean, and again,
were we finding the same type of stuff I was finding about the disruptions to menstrual cycles and stuff? And
no, I didn't find any of that. I mean, I think where I'm at is that there's just no information on it. I kind of where my research stopped and ended was there's no information on this. They haven't been researching it long enough for there to be information on it. And I'm not putting I'm a woman of a certain freaking age. If I try to get pregnant now, it's going to be harder for me. And so am I going to like mess around with that at all?
Further complicate it?
Yeah. That just again, this is just like basic common sense. And again, I might sound like a heartless bitch for saying it this way, but I'm sorry. You want to bring a child into this world and you can't do basic math to know that a vaccine that hasn't even been in development for a year, there's not going to be research on it. You just lack street smarts at that point, and you probably shouldn't be raising a kid anyway.
Darwin Awards, like you said.
I mean, this is just like, look at a calendar, man. Like, just look at a calendar. That's literally count the number of months. That's literally all you need to do. And so, I don't know. It's like, okay, hang on. What was the question? Where did I start on this rant from?
I asked you about, if you saw anything about the disruptions to menstrual cycles, which were,
if you not, but it
specifically type in COVID-19 vaccine, side effects, menstrual cycle, or menstruation, you'll find that. And I'm surprised, but it's just nonstop. And so it's like, this is not hidden, to your point about this is out there, people look. But the other thing, as I said, what do you think about finding where it says pregnant persons?
Oh, that was the other one. That was
eliminating women once again, as a distinct, person.
Well, but
it's immoral.
No, I mean, but this is the broader level, like cultural issues that I think people should be really worried about. I mean, and if you look at so cults, they try to eliminate gender. If you look at there are all these documentaries about the Heaven's Gate cult that came out last year, and so I watched all of them because I'm fascinated by cults. And one of the things that the Heaven's Gate cult tried to do is eliminate gender. From they had everyone dressed the same. Oh yeah, they eliminated all gender by the end of that cult. By the time they all killed themselves and went to join the spaceship in the sky. And so this is something that you see cults doing. And so does it surprise me at all? No. Because they're trying to make everyone fit into this hive mind sort of thing that they're developing. And that's the scariest part of all the woke stuff and critical race theory and however we want to call it, this far left ideology, is they're trying to eliminate everything that makes us who we are, right?
Yeah, every individual thing.
And I think part of the reason that we have trouble fighting back is that we don't know what success looks like in this scenario. My supposition for what success looks like is that we want to develop a color indifferent society based on individualism and meritocracy. But I don't know how many people buy into that idea. Or even if it's part of the reason that I think the right just backlashes against the left all the time is they don't have a vision for what success looks like for themselves, or what type of world they want to create, or how they want to support people, how they want society to evolve. And so I think that they get stuck into this trap of everything the left does is wrong because we don't have we don't have a vision that we can call our own. And maybe the vision is that it's this color indifferent society based on individualism and meritocracy. I don't know. I mean, what do you think success looks like in this arena?
Well, to his credit, I think Sam Harris is the one who originally said that about the color indifferent society is he said he would like to get to a place where color, we think about skin color the same way as we think about hair color. You notice it, but it has no bearing on how you view that person.
Right.
Natural hair color, green haired, radical feminist or blue haired is a different thing. But where he says, yeah, you notice it, but it's that doesn't impact, anything. It doesn't change how you view them as a person. What do I think success looks like? I mean, is what I said, where I think people have to see liberty as being freedom is directly tied to their life outcomes. Because if they don't see freedom as being directly tied to their life outcomes, then they're not going to value freedom. This is the chapter. So Kevin and I just got done recording for our next Road to Serfdom one. And Hayek, this is where this dude is so brilliant. He talks about how in a planned society, security becomes the main currency that people deal in. And security is granted to people. And when secure by these elites, by it's a privilege that's given by the planners. And whenever security becomes that thing, people will readily give up all types of liberty in order to get that, because that's the main currency, is security. And so we need to get to a place where people see their life outcomes as being directly tied to their own freedom and their own liberty. I think that's what success looks like in the long term. In the short term, it looks like not being, run out of town by a mob with pitchforks and torches because I'm unvaccinated.
Well, again, you and I live in places where we probably won't happen, and because we've taken responsibility to live in those places. Now, I feel sincerely bad for everyone that lives in a city, but the city, honestly, I said this from the beginning with like the whole defund the police thing. I thought that what needed to happen was that there just needed to be one urban police force to quit just all on the same day and just be like, F you guys, we're not coming in. You want to defund the police? Fine, you have no more police. And they all just quit. And I think the whole defund the police initiative would have been over in like a month if one urban police force had just done that. Like in Chicago or LA or New York. Yeah, it would have sucked for people in those cities. But again, sometimes we have to have a little pain to put us on the right track.
Well, this goes to the information thing, because even CNN and NPR and MSNBC have run multiple articles about the crime spikes in these cities.
Right.
They're not hiding the information, but people are so dedicated to their ideology. This goes to exactly what you're saying about how people have to experience pain. Another way of saying that is they have to experience the consequences of their decisions. Mm-hmm. They have to see a connection between I chose A caused reaction B. I don't like reaction B, so I should probably quit choosing A. Mm-hmm. But they're not seeing that. And this is where it's these, what they call the champagne socialists, where it's like, yeah, defund the police. Who does that hurt? The inner city. They don't live in that part of town. They live in gated communities where they have private security forces, so they can advocate for these moronic policies because they don't impact them. Mm-hmm. They don't impact them. So anyway, so here's that's what I think about that. But my final question, to you is, because I don't know, I assume we'll probably talk within the next 2 weeks or before school starts, but I want to be certain thing about this is, so Scott Adams has this, I think the thing he says, which is great, where he says, if you want to know if your paradigms are right or not, make predictions. Make predictions you can measure whether or not they're right or not. So I would like to start trying to make some predictions of what September, October is going to look like in terms of when school's in session for K through 12 and for universities. Because right now it feels like we're in a calm before the storm, because people are able to stay segmented, right? The unvaccinated, the vaccinated, and the masked and the unmasked or whatever are only intermingling at the grocery store or on the sidewalk. But whenever they're sending their kids to those places, or when you're at universities, they're acquiring this stuff, we're going to see a real rubber meets the road, conflict happening here, butting of heads. Mm-hmm. So what do you think that's going to look like, practically, once these ideas and the people who oppose them, especially in institutions that have been largely captured, in the next couple of months, what do you think?
So I want to take the university question separate from the K through 12 schools, because I think that those so K through 12 schools are compelled, people have to go to those things. I actually think the university question is going to be interesting in that, so a lot of universities, and so people sometimes when they think of universities, they only think of the Harvards or the Princetons or the Yales, these universities that have more money than God, that will be around forever. But most universities are not like that. Most universities are in heavy debt, because they spent the last 10-15 years building up their campuses to look like these luxury hotels, and they financed all of this through debt. Right. So what did they need to do in order to do that? They all had to try to recruit students. We're getting more competitive with each other. We're investing. I cannot even tell you how exorbitant some of the university investments into marketing and branding and these fancy admissions brochures and all these things are, because they were trying to recruit more students in order to balance out this massive debt load that they took on. Right. So this has been going on for 10-15 years. And actually there was a guy out of Harvard named Clay Christensen who predicted, I want to say around 2010, 2011-ish, that half of the universities in the country were going to go out of business within the next 10 years. Well, guess what? Now we're getting to that place. And universities are telling people, if you're not vaccinated, GTFO. Yep. So they're giving up all that tuition money. And by the way, a lot of them are doing this hybrid thing now, where they're doing online versus on campus stuff. So they're losing that revenue as well. I actually think this could accelerate the demise of the universities. We'll see. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but we'll see how many people actually choose to comply, what their admissions rates look like. This is not like an easy fix, right? It would take several years of decline. I mean, we can look at like Evergreen State College and know that a university that has declining admissions, they don't just close overnight, right? It's a trajectory of several years of the numbers just going down and down and down and down and down. But I think that we're starting to hit this place where I think a lot of people are questioning the value of the university, particularly when they're doing this online learning thing. So you don't even need to be there on campus anyway. So why are we paying tens of thousands? I mean, the tuition rates of some of these universities, Truman, have you looked at university tuition rates lately? Like, it's insane. We're talking like 50, 60, 70, $80,000 for a year at a university. It is unsustainable. And so you add in this other factor where you're going to be driving students away if they don't want to get a mandated vaccine. I think we're going to start seeing universities close. And I think that that's a really good thing. Now, K through 12 is a totally different thing, but I do think that I think the homeschool industry is good at, like, any business that's investing in the homeschool industry. I think those businesses are going to start booming. I do. We'll see. But that's what I think is going to happen. I think that the more that they try to mandate and force this stuff on people, the more we're going to see people opting out of what they believe like the traditional system to be. And I don't actually think it would take that many over the course of, the next couple of years for people to start to say, oh, maybe this wasn't such a good idea to begin with. I could be wrong, but that's what I think.
Well, sure. Eric Weinstein calls the, he makes these really great acronyms, that the model of higher ed, he calls it the ego. It has an embedded growth obligation. It has an obligation to continue to grow at an unsustainable rate in order to exist. And so you're right. I'm interested if you can find that study about the guy talking about the universities going out of business. I'd be interested to see that.
Yeah. Clay Christensen, he wrote a whole book about it.
Clay Christensen. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the higher ed, if students are attending online, I think a lot of the money, I've seen this at the University of Wyoming in Laramie and my alma mater in Missouri. They had entire dormitories before COVID even happened, entire dormitories where they didn't use them for a school year because their enrollments were down. So, I think one of the biggest parts of tuition is housing, is food and housing, is where they just charge you, completely out the ass, these exorbitant rates, like you said. So that'll be interesting to see. My only concern there is that just further hermetically seals those institutions as where anyone who is sane or rational has now opted out of the credentialing process. And so then the only people being credentialed now are people that are probably activists or that are super far left, because they've just given one more tangible way for people who don't want to get on board with this stuff to opt out, to self-select out. I mean, so that's a problem. We've already seen where like conservatives are like, they can't get PhDs, for example. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Carlin?
Yeah, it's a little janky, okay, but I can hear you.
Sorry, I said my internet was unstable and like your face was frozen.
No, I can hear you. You're good.
Where conservatives were already, so like it's hard for them to get PhDs. And so someone like, Ben Shapiro would say, just shut up and say what they want you to say so you can get the degree and get out of there, and then you can say what you want to do. But there's already like it's a huge self-selection process for people who are not activists and not like on board with this stuff to make it through the system. And so by adding this, it's going to add one more layer of self-selection for them to opt out of it. And which again makes it where what happens, in 4 or 5 years, 6 years, when the only doctors are people that are total activists, or the only engineers are people that are total activists, or the only neurosurgeons, or the only, any of these things, astrophysicists are credentialed. The only people that are credentialed that are coming out of these places don't know anything. And But I think in the short term, that's an interesting question to look at, and it does create opportunity for places that don't believe this crap and don't want to do this crap to spring up. So there is that. One of the things that I told someone in my locals community was asked a question because I was in Montana this last week, and said they were going to be moving to Montana, and I said, yeah, I think that we need people to move to places like Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, North Dakota, Utah, so that we can have one that's going to increase the state representatives in those places. And we need rival cities. There are cities that don't exist yet that are going to rival these leftist like hive minds, metropolitan areas. And so we need those things. And out of those places, we'll get competing institutions and competing universities. So there's that, but I think that you're right to make a distinction between the public university and K through 12. The K through 12 one is one I'm really going to have my eyes on.
Yeah. Because
my prediction is we're going to see violence break out between parents.
We already have.
I'm saying it's going to get worse, but that because they're going to be forced into the same place. So here's like the question of like what happens when fall sports start up again. And this is one you can't include college in. What happens with college football, where it's like you have people that want to go to the games. It's like, well, because if the university area has it in place where the students and the faculty have to be vaccinated, who's to say they're not going to put those mandates on, the people to attend these sporting events? You got something like the SEC where this is a big business. Now, maybe green will be the thing that matters most and they won't do it. I don't know. But with high schools, it's like, what happens when it's like, I want my kid to be on the football team or whatever, and they're saying that they have to be vaccinated in order to do that. This parent is going to be, I don't want to wear a mask to my kid's game, and these are saying. So I think they're going to see violence in that regard as these things are clashing, as because they're vying for the same physical space. A football team, a football game, a basketball game, whatever. That's a limited physical space that only one ideology between these two can win out in. They're not going to be able to coexist. So I think that's going to create some serious conflict in these events. Basketball and football are the main ones. I don't know. I think some places do swimming in the winter, but I'm just thinking about the short term, which is football is the first one. I don't know what other events. I think maybe track, actually. A lot of places might start out with track at the beginning of the year as well. Some do it in the fall, and some do it in the spring, and some do it both. But that's what I'm thinking about, is that we're going to see serious clashes, and it's going to force something. The plot's going to find us there. But I'm worried about, it's going to create the most potential, I think, for places to change.
I think
because if you get enough pissed off parents, are going to seize these school boards,
Well, that's
and that'll also help with the CRT stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying, though. It's the only way that this is going to change is if these parents are caused pain. So if there's going to be more fights at school football games, good. This is the situation that we have created for ourselves. And if the only way out of it is by causing people pain, and frankly, by pointing out this pain that's caused, and even sticking our finger in the pain, be like, do you feel it yet? Is it bad yet? Is it bad yet? Do you want it to get better? Or you still want it? Because I can stick my finger in there harder if you want to. If that's the only thing that's going to elicit a response from people, then good.
Well, let's clarify. We would not be the ones causing them pain. It's them experiencing pain from their own decisions.
Oh, well, yes, but also I want to be there to say what did you expect to happen? What did you think was going to happen? And guess what? If you don't speak up now, here's what's going to happen next. And here's what's going to happen the next thing. And here's what's going to happen after that. So do I think that frankly, I think that one of the best things that people like you and I can do is frankly exacerbate the pain, is make it worse, is to remind them that just because if you bend the knee for this one thing, that doesn't mean that you're going to be set forever, because then there's going to be another demand after that. And then there's going to be another demand after that. And it's just going to keep getting more and more and more painful. It's not going to stop just because you give in this one time. And I think that there is a role that people need to play in making sure people understand this.
So would you say, because I worry that there are people who really, really misunderstand what you just said, the distinction I would make is it's one thing to actively participate in it. It's another thing to help explain the situation and say, this is only going to get worse. So, like, you need to understand what you're experiencing now is not temporary. It will actually get progressively worse and worse and worse if you don't do something. And you might not like me for saying this. You might not like my tone of voice and how I'm explaining it, but I'm just being real with you in that, okay, it sucks that you're experiencing this now, but hopefully you see that you have to come and freaking do something about it, or else you need to shut up because it's only going to get worse. So, like, there's a difference. Like, in other words, I'm not going to go and try to, like, actually actively encourage a vaccine mandate or mask mandate or something like that, or that someone's business be shut down. But I will say, this is the consequences. You made your bed, you're sleeping in it. This is the fruit of the ideas that you have advocated for, you know, and you need to understand that this is not some isolated thing. These are connected. A caused B. You don't like B. Stop advocating for A. So that's the kind of thing. So, I mean, does that make sense? Is that at least a fair distinction?
It does. But I would also say that if there are people that would willfully misunderstand my point here, like, because I do frankly think it would be a willful misinterpretation to say that I'm not the one who put vaccine mandates in place. I'm the one that's been screaming about this stuff for the last year. I've been the one screaming about the psychological impacts of masks, right?
Yeah.
Like, so if people want to willfully misinterpret and say Carlin wants to cause us all pain and she's just returning to her leftist roots and all these things, like, I guess that's like a strategy. Is it going to help you at all? No. Is it going to ultimately lead to you experiencing more pain in the future? Yes. And I will be there smiling every step of the way saying, you wanted to pin this on me? This was your doing. And I pointed out to you exactly what was going to happen. And I was right. I'm sorry that you experienced pain, but that is not my fault. That is your fault. And until you man up and start acting like a GD adult, it's going to keep going this way.
Fair enough.
My patience is done, Truman. I'm sorry. Like, I have zero patience left for this nonsense.
I did not get that. I'm glad you clarified that, because I was thinking, man, Carlin's feeling really patient with these people at the beginning. Like, so I'm glad.
No. Carlin has no patience.
I feel it too, man. It is frustrating. It's like,
and it sucks. It sucks though, because it's like I feel like you can say, like, you can tell people these things, you can say it with like the best intentions of helping them. But this is just another example of what I'm talking about. Is like, I have so many people that spend so much more time attacking me than they do the actual problem. And I'm like, are you surprised that the problem is still there? Because you just spent the last 3 weeks attacking me. Like, I'm not the problem. The problem is this other thing that I've been pointing out to you and saying, this is the problem. And you chose to direct your energy at me. So again, that's a personal choice. That is your problem. Like, at the end of the day, I'm not going to feel like I'm going to be fine no matter what. Again, I live in New Hampshire. We just banned all this stuff. But like, if people want to direct their energy in really unproductive ways, that's not something I can control. That's not something you can control. They're the only ones that can control that. And I think the reason that I have very little patience with humanity right now is I'm seeing so many people direct their energy in just really absurd ways. And the only thing that I can surmise from all of this is like, okay, you want us all to suffer. Fine. Fine. You're going to suffer worse than me. And that's really all I can control at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's that saying, that some people can be told, and that's good enough. Others won't believe you if you tell them, but if they see it, then they'll be convinced. And everyone else just has to piss on the electric fence themselves. And there's a lot of people that's where they're at right now with these ideas. They just have to, like you said, experience that jolt of, oh, that was really dumb. That's really bad. And so fair enough. And then if that includes misdirecting their energy and misdirecting, their priorities, that's all going to be part of receiving that shock of realizing that they are wasting their time and actually probably making things worse.
Yeah.
So how do you want to end it? We're about at the 2-hour mark. What do you think? What are your final thoughts?
Well, I feel like I'm in a worse place at the end of this conversation than at the beginning. So thank you, Truman, for this doom and gloom podcast. No, I mean,
Sorry.
No. I mean, well, I think this, like, it's, where do I want to end it? I think if there's one shining ray of hope in this is that, people do have the power to turn this around in an instant. They do. It's just like, you can change your mind in an instant. You can choose to look at something a different way in an instant. Where I am struggling right now is I see most people out there choosing to become zombies, choosing to become pod people. And I'm like I don't want to be a pod person. And I don't want to have to act like a pod person in order to get through this dystopian nightmare. And, you know, but I also can't control if you want to do that. And so it's kind of like, if the collective will of humanity right now is to have this morbid kind of desire to be controlled by other people or an authoritarian or tyrannical government, is there anything that we can really do to stop it? No, I think that we have to hope that, you know, in the enacting of some of these things and in the experiencing of the consequences of these things, that more and more people are going to realize how much they value freedom and liberty to begin with, and that will start to wake them up. Because there are still a lot of people who, I mean, this shift is like these things have taken a major shift in our lifetime. This was things were not like this in the 90s.
Totally.
Okay.
Totally.
They were not like this in the 90s. And so there are people living today that grew up in the 90s that remember what things were like and that they could be better. If we don't get a handle on it in the next 20 years, I think we're going to be kind of screwed. But I do still think there's still time for enough people to wake up to turn it around. But they have to want to.
Yeah. I think that's well said. And I really like that. I mean, the notion that we are just one collective F this away from rejecting this crap is actually kind of encouraging. Because I think you're right. And that is one of the things I'm looking for whenever I say, like, I think this fall is going to be lit. I think that the conflict of these ideologies coming to a head is going to be good, I think, in the long term, and does have the potential. Because I would much rather, like, everything that we just talked about, that needs to be the thing at the center of the 2022 midterms, right? What is going to facilitate that better than these conflicts being on the front of everyone's mind, than these policies being on the front of everyone's mind? So, you know, and if the will of the people, one, is even able to be heard, but two, is heard in the voting process, where people, you know, like, look at the recall in California, where it's like, yeah, they very well might actually recall Gavin Newsom. You know, so like that alone is pretty big. Now, of course, there's a huge gap between Gavin Newsom is bad and all of our progressive ideas are bad. Like, that's a different thing. But you know, you gotta crawl before you can walk. So if people are, you know, we want to reward people and encourage people if they're moving in the right direction, even if it's not at the same pace as we would like. So fair enough. I think you still managed to end it on an encouraging note, despite the fact that I feel like all of this, you know, in my mind has been like, what do we do about the fact that we're all going to die, not from Delta, but from the Delta response, you know, here in 3 months? Because that's, man, it has really been consuming my thoughts, to be honest. So anyway,
we're pretty screwed. But I mean, I think that people need to keep in mind, again, it's like, it's sometimes things need to get bad. And if people take personal responsibility for themselves and they try to isolate themselves and insulate themselves as much as they can, you're going to get through it fine. Like, I mean, you got to figure out how you're going to make money from like a non-woke job. You got to figure out how you're going to pay your bills. You got to figure out how you're going to take care of your kids. But these are all fixable problems if people just like get out there and they hustle. Like, there are a million different ways to make money. There's different things you can do for your kids to keep them out of these schools. You can move to states that have laws and are enforcing laws in a way that that are aligning with your values,
or have cultures that are going to be creating those laws.
You can support people that are trying to fix these things. These are all feasible solutions. And I think, like, short term, people have to just start taking personal responsibility for themselves and making sure their life is together, because you can't help other people until you take care of yourself anyway. And then once you get that taken care of, then, you know, maybe going back and fighting out on a bigger level, but you have to make sure your own security is taken care of first. Yeah.
And so let's end it there, in that you said we're pretty screwed, but then you just laid out a pretty concise unscrewing template for people on an individual level. So to go with the name of the show, look at that. So thank you everyone for watching. I appreciate this. Follow Carlin at kb.locals.com, Dr. Carlin B
Dr.
Dr.
Carlin. Well, so
Dr. Carlin on
my
Twitter.
website, yeah, on Twitter, my handle is Dr. Carlin B. I'm either Dr. Carlin B or Carlin on every platform, basically.
Yeah, including Rumble. She's really active on Rumble, so be
I'm
sure
not
to,
really
to get
active
over
on
there.
Rumble.
Yeah, but Locals is the main place. Same with me.
Yeah.
My Locals community is the one that is, it's like that's the main one. But YouTube, Twitter, My Mundane Mind, and Medium, ThinkSpot, as I create content for those places, which
Excellent.
is sparse. Do you have anything else to add before we take off?
No, another good episode, Truman, where we might even make it to episode 4 at this rate.
I hope so, because we got to see if these predictions are correct.
We do. We're committed now. We're committed through the fall anyway. And
we still haven't even I still haven't gotten the I want to hear about PorkFest. I still haven't got to talk to you about PorkFest. So let's talk about PorkFest. Let's deviate from some of this black pill stuff and do a breakdown of PorkFest for the next one.
Next episode will be a fun episode.
Yes, yeah, because I can't. This stuff murders me emotionally. So anyway, all right. Thanks everyone. We will see you next time.
Thank you guys.
Peace.